Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Bread Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family. Today on Sue's Healthy Minutes, I want to read to you an It's the Bread story, and an incredible one it is. Rachel Hester of Whoopsie Daisy Farm emailed me to share her testimony, well, more specifically, her husband's incredible journey. I actually reached out to her and we recorded an episode with her and her husband, Kyle. But when we went to release it, the sound was really poor quality. Try as we might, we couldn't fix it. With my heavy travel schedule in August, we just couldn't find a time to reschedule an interview to re-record. So I decided I would simply read her original email where she shared most of their story and then try to later have them both on again. Their story is just too good, and I simply couldn't wait to share it. I'll give you a little background on Rachel and her husband, Kyle. Their farm is located in Stanford, Kentucky, and Rachel hosts her own podcast called The Woolly Way. That's W-H-E-Y. Rachel is the author of the popular book, The Guide to Homestead Dairy Sheep. In addition to managing a homestead, Kyle has an emergency service job. Rachel emailed me to say thank you. So here is their It's the Bread story as she wrote it to me. Hi, Miss Sue. I and my family were in your delightful store earlier this week on our way back home from vacation in Florida and absolutely loved it. I spoke with your son who answered my plethora of questions about mixers and flakers, etc. While chatting, the subject of podcasts came up and he encouraged me to email you. So I have two things. Number one, my podcast. I have a teeny tiny podcast called The Woolly Way. It's predominantly about dairy sheep for homesteaders. I am the author of a book on raising sheep for the purpose of harvesting milk, and it's rather successful if I do say so myself. The podcast is about 1.5 years old, so still small. However, a lot of folks get into dairy sheep due to food sensitivities and health issues, and sheep milk is actually able to address quite a few of them. Since milk and grains are the current objects of vilification in the modern health movement, I want to share with folks about the healing nature of freshly milled flour. We just started milling as of last September, and these grains have been a miraculous answer to prayer. So I want to help spread the word about freshly milled flour. I also feel like us proponents of healthy milk and proponents of healthy grains ought to stick together to help spread the truth about these foods God created. Number two, my It's the Bread testimony. So I've already mentioned we just started fresh milled flour in September of last year, and my husband is in emergency services. The full story is this. A month after Kyle and I married in 2013, my husband Kyle donated bone marrow to an anonymous cancer patient. They did the procedure different than they standardly do, and it turns out they used an experimental procedure, and it completely wrecked Kyle's health. He went from a 26-year-old seemingly healthy man to about an 82-year-old man within hours. No immune system left, severe brain fog, no libido. He was someone completely different than the man I married. Over the course of the years, I pursued a certificate in nutritional therapy, learned about Weston A. Price, raw milk, grass-fed meats, Joel Salatin, and pastured eggs, essential oils, homeopathy, the works. We started homesteading, raising our own meat, milk, and eggs, and he started healing. He healed to the point where we were talking about starting a family, and then 2020 hit. As a police officer, we had a double whammy with both the pandemic and the overnight national struggles facing him each day on the job. Since we had already participated in experimental medicine, we had no interest in receiving the vaccine, but that added further pressure from his employer. We got sick, both of us, with COVID in February of 2021, and then Kyle switched jobs. A few months later, he was working in the fields of our homestead, and he came down with an odd rash, and his health crashed again. We still don't know if he was bitten by a tick that summer or just got a bad poison ivy case. But basically, all the autoimmune diseases seemed to strike at once. IBS, arthritis, eczema, weeping hives, back to no libido, severe brain fog to the point that half the time he sounded drunk. We saw a local natural health practitioner who said his gallbladder was the main issue and encouraged us to remove it, but we didn't want to pursue surgery. At the same time, somehow I was pregnant. I had a casebook healthy pregnancy, but the birth was traumatic, and if I hadn't been in the hospital, I am fairly sure the baby and I both would have died. My postpartum healing took about 1.5 years, during which time we went to multiple specialists for physical therapy for me, and I tried multiple ways of overcoming postpartum exhaustion and anxiety, while at the same time trying to keep my husband's health to where he could at least keep working. It was one of the hardest seasons of my entire life. Our chiropractor at the time recommended that Kyle try eliminating grains to see if that was a food trigger. So he did. He would experience a brief respite from the brain fog, the digestive issues, arthritis symptoms, and what was eventually diagnosed as eczema, but then they would come back. So he'd try eliminating another food group. It got to the point if he ate anything other than chicken, blueberries, oats, and hazelnut butter, he could barely function. He did that for a few months, but it's rather hard to enjoy life when you can't eat. And as you know, in the South, food equals fellowship. So if you can't participate in the meal, you aren't really accepted in a lot of groups. Then Kyle had an appendectomy, and they found scar tissue all over his digestive tract. He was tested for celiac, colitis, Crohn's disease, but the test all came back negative. I remember the day after the doctor appointment when the doctors started pushing gallbladder removal again. I just knew removing it wouldn't solve anything. I remember exactly which bathroom I was in, sobbing, and prayed, God, you have to intervene. I'm sorry to boss you around, and I know there's folks with far bigger issues than this one I'm bringing to you, but you have to do something. We need a miracle. You called Kyle to be a police officer. You called us to Homestead. You called me to write and speak and share about sheep. We can't even care for the sheep the way we know you want us to because of how sick and broken we are. You have to do something or take away these callings and let us go live in a townhouse and die young. Do something, Lord. Do something. Give us answers. Within a week, YouTube recommended Alex Clark's first interview with you on Cultured Apothecary. Within a few weeks, we were visiting friends in Florida who had just bought a KitchenAid attachment and were grinding their own flour. So she asked Kyle if he would like to try some Kamut sourdough English muffins that she had made. He said yes and had the first grains he had eaten in almost 3 years. The hardest thing about Kyle's health was the brain fog. He couldn't remember anything, couldn't follow through on commitments. It was impossible to think through things together or plan or really build a life together because his brain was so shot. He has a great sense of humor, and it had been gone too. Within a week of eating freshly milled grains, he solved a problem that had been plaguing us on the homestead for literally years. He remembered something he committed to. He started humming and singing again while he did daily tasks. and he cracked a joke one day, and I started crying. The other thing was he inhaled grains like a starving man. I practically lived in the kitchen. As soon as something was baked, he ate it. It was so exhausting. I'd quadruple a recipe, and he'd eat the whole thing in one standing. I called my friend who had first fed him those sourdough English muffins and complained, and she pointed out to me, Rachel, he's starving. His body is literally starving for these nutrients. It'll even out, but keep baking for him. He's trying to heal. Well, she was right. It took about 3 months. The obnoxious thing was he lost weight while eating me out of house and home. When we first started, he could only eat Kamut, and he couldn't eat any dairy. Now he can have Kamut or Coruscant, depending on where you buy it from. Spelt, oats, and rye if it's fermented. I've tried the modern wheats, but his system isn't ready for them yet. He also can't do modern yeast. It has to be sourdough or soaked for a few hours in the liquids in the recipe for quick breads. But we have been able to add dairy back in with the grains and also duck eggs. Sue, I didn't realize the last several years that I have felt like I've been in a culinary prison. I have always loved baking, and my cooking was one of the things that caused Kyle to fall in love with me. We have always been big foodies and loved trying new recipes and restaurants. Having the freedom to use eggs again, to use milk again, and to bake and hear his sigh of pleasure and see his eyes sparkle when I tell him there's fresh-made cookies waiting for him after a long day of work. Well, Sue, I'm crying as I type this. I didn't know how painfully I missed that. Before the grains, when he went to work, he kept his head down, got the job done. Since the grains, he had fixed several issues in his department and has even been promoted. He was scared before about postpartum and if we would survive. Now he's excited about pursuing another baby. He has PTSD from both his occupation and life events that caused him to pursue this line of work. I don't know how much you know about PTSD, but it's a very stressful condition to live with, and there are flares from circumstantial triggers when the brain cannot differentiate between past and present. His PTSD symptoms have dropped significantly, and we are able to work through flares far better than we ever have before. While the eczema is still an issue, we now have something we haven't had before: hope. It will heal with time and grains. The grains have been hugely helpful with my healing as well. My stamina has improved. I am able to discipline myself to exercise and heal my body and move my hips in ways I couldn't before. I am able to problem solve more, and the anxiety and depression has plummeted. Before grains, I was terrified about postpartum. Now I catch myself thinking about when in the next pregnancy to cook and freeze things for postpartum and nursing. The beautiful thing is that our now 3-year-old will never remember a time without fresh milled flour. He knows that mama has to make flour before she makes sticky dough, and sticky dough means something tasty. His immune system is strong, and he's so smart he runs circles around me sometimes. Anyway, Sue, I could go on, but the gist of it is God used you as an answer to prayer, and grains saved our life. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and God bless you. Rachel Hester, whoopsiedaisyfarm.com. And so that's Rachel and Kyle's story. You know, for the past few years, God has given me a new motto: food freedom. But recently, he has expanded that passion to proclaim freedom even beyond food. Hearing Rachel say she was in culinary prison with the immense dietary restrictions on her husband Kyle reminded me of so many others that have shared that they were down to only 7 to 8 foods they could eat. So not only has Real Bread brought food freedom to them, but culinary freedom as well. And for the many that have shared that before discovering Real Bread, they could not leave their home due to uncontrollable bowel movements, but now Real Bread, has given them their life back, and they have life freedom, freedom to leave their house and do whatever they want. This all reminds me of the verse in Isaiah 61 that the Lord gave me so many years ago, that I was to proclaim liberty to the captives. So I proclaim to you today food freedom, culinary freedom, and life freedom. Kyle shared with me that Rachel was always sending him podcasts to listen to at work. He also said that he doesn't get to listen to most of them. But the podcast I did with Alex Clark on Cultured Apothecary last year, entitled, "What If Gluten Is Not the Enemy?" caught his attention, and he listened. And he said when he listened to that podcast, for the first time in years, he had a small sliver of hope that this bread, real bread, just might be the answer that could help him. It is such an honor and a true blessing for me to be used by God to bring hope to others. Remember, please share this episode of Sue's Healthy Minutes with someone you care about. Kyle's story might bring hope to someone in great need. And I can't wait for you to hear the rest of their story. Until next time, this is Sue Becker from Bread Beckers with Sue's Healthy Minutes.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Bread Beckers Incorporated, located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.